Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Cape Talk.
In Family Matters today, we want to revisit the challenges of the foster care system in South Africa and the opportunities as well. You may remember from the last time we discussed this that the stats are pretty dire. At least 2.5 million South African children, probably more, are living without any parent in their life. And some of them are lucky enough to be cared for by extended family, particularly grandparents stepping into that role, but many are not so lucky. And for those children, the foster care system can be a really crucial lifeline. Our guest today informs us that there are currently nearly 400,000 children in foster care in this country. And yet there's still a lot of misunderstanding of what is actually involved in fostering and who can be a part of that system. So I've asked her to join us to provide some insight into how it actually works and to talk to us about the challenges and opportunities that come with it. Beverley is her name. She's the MD of Oasis Haven, which is a registered child and youth care facility in Johannesburg. But more importantly, she is a social worker who has worked with orphaned and vulnerable children for more than 20 years and has herself personally fostered 9 children. Beverley, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Pippa.
Thanks. I think most people have an understanding of adoption, where a parent takes a child into their family permanently. Can you explain how foster care differs from that system, Beverley? Is it only to do with the length of time of the placement, or is there more to it than that?
There's definitely more to it than that, because when you adopt, that child becomes yours as if born to you. Yeah. So they're yours forever. A foster child could be in your care for a short time. Every 2 years you go back to court, but they could potentially stay with you until they age out of the system and at least informally remain part of your family forever. But obviously they don't take on things like your name. They're not legally your child. They could be moved based on their circumstances and the circumstances of their biological parents.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that it might only be for a short time. Can that include a matter of sort of hours or days, Beverley? I've heard of sort of emergency foster placements where a child has been taken away from an abusive situation that can be very, very short term. Is that fairly common?
It is. That's officially called a place of safety. Yep. So foster care is usually when the child is what they call finalized at court. So then you have a 2-year court order with foster care. And prior to that, which shouldn't last for longer than 6 months, you are a place of safety. So foster families can do place of safety, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's much more temporary.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about why a child might need foster care. Beverley, as I've mentioned, there's the very real situation in South Africa that many children simply do not have parents of their own to care for them. But there's more to it than that, isn't it?
Of course. So any child that's found to be in need of care, so that could be because of abuse, neglect, abandonment, obviously parents passing away, anything that has left the child to be in a vulnerable situation could be the reason for them to be placed in foster care.
Okay. And I mean, it might seem like an obvious question, but let's talk about the desired outcome for a child. I mean, why would foster care be the best possible situation for a child who's been removed from, for example, a situation of neglect? What is it that the fostering process aims to offer that child other than a safe roof over their head?
So a children's home is still obviously a very viable option, and children's homes these days are less institutionalized than they used to be. But that is never your end goal for any child. Children should be in family. Mm-hmm. And so foster care is able to give a sense of family much more easily than a children's home would be able to.
Okay, important. Now, let's talk about who can actually be a foster parent, Beverley, because we've all heard the horror stories of people who took it on for the sake of getting their hands on a foster grant, which is easier said than done, by the way, for the record. But Beverley, I mean, are there checks and balances and sort of testing of parents in any way to make sure that this is actually a suitable person who is going to have the best interests of the child at heart?
Yes, definitely. So these days the screening is much more intensive. So obviously you would be screened by the social worker wanting to place the child in your care, but they can ask for emotional and psychological assessments to be done. They will look at your financial situation. They will check you against the child protection register to ensure that you haven't been convicted of a crime where you've harmed a child in some way. You would have a police clearance. They would do a home visit. So there really are a lot of checks and balances that are done these days to ensure as much as possible that foster parents are a safe place, as well as that their motives for wanting to foster are correct.
Okay. So are there any other criteria? Obviously, as you've mentioned, you've got to be able to pass that clearance check of your criminal background, but are there any other non-negotiable criteria in terms of age or financial status or anything like that?
So not something that covers like as a blanket statement. So different child protection organizations who are approving foster parents would have different criteria.
Okay.
So some may place more value on having a higher income. Others may place value on you being married. But according to the Children's Act, you need to be over 18 and then found to be a suitable place. So that's obviously left to people's interpretation. But there's nothing that we can say, if you have this, other than, having a criminal record or being on the child protection register. There isn't anything that strikes you off immediately.
Okay. Beverley, you've had the experience of fostering 9 children yourself. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about some of the factors that came into play that you weren't expecting, the particular challenges, the particular delights that came with that experience?
Gosh, yes, it's definitely an interesting and very fulfilling journey. It's not easy to just give you specific things because every child brings something unique to the situation, and that's going to depend on their age, their background, what trauma have they experienced. And then there's obviously the factors such as where do they fit into the family. So with your other children, sometimes they will connect better with one of the parents and not as much with the other one, or one of the parents will connect better with them than the other one does. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. I think that you need to know that you're okay with being a parent to this child in every sense of the word for as long as they need you. And if that means after 2 years they are moved, have to know that you can deal with that, and that you're not going to fall apart and that your family's not going to fall apart. I think fostering is so necessary, but at the same time, we do have to protect the core family that's already there, and not be doing harm to families along the way.
Beverley, have you ever been in the experience of having a child who has aged out of the system, as they say, who turns 18 while they've been a foster child under your roof? Because a lot of people are asking what happens to these children once they reach the legal age of 18.
So I haven't had any foster children that have aged out, but obviously in my role at the children's home, which is similar and seen as the same kind of court order, we've had children age out. And that is the challenge, is that just because they're 18 doesn't mean they don't still need support. They don't need, not many 18-year-olds are ready to just go and move in on their own, be able to financially support themselves. So what is interesting is that children can stay in the system until they're 21, so they could remain in foster care until they're 21 if they are still studying.
Okay.
That's the only requirement for that order to be extended, obviously along with the child saying, yes, I want to remain in this placement, and the foster parents also saying, yes, we want them to remain. So that does help because it gives them that couple of years extra.
Yeah.
I think within foster care, usually most foster parents, if they've had a child that has got to the point of aging out and the placement hasn't broken down prior to that, they will probably continue to parent that child well into adulthood. I think the danger is much more within a children's home setting where it's an organization and it's not as easy to, continue supporting them as it is when you're a private family.
Okay. Just for anybody who came in late to the conversation, we're chatting to Beverley Bjerkes, who's the MD of Oasis Haven, which is a children's home based in Johannesburg. Beverley has herself fostered 9 children over the years and is a social worker who's worked in this space for more than 20 years, talking to us about how the system works and some of the challenges that come with it. Now, Beverley, I mentioned the issue of the foster grants, and I do recall that a couple of years ago, at least, we had a conversation with a lawyer who was lamenting the fact that the process of getting approvals in place and actually getting foster grants released to those people who were caring for foster children had hit major backlogs. As a matter of interest, has that situation been resolved yet?
That is a very good question, simply because I personally haven't been claiming any grants in recent years, but I haven't been hearing anything that it's still specifically a problem. So I think that it is largely resolved, yes.
That's very good to hear. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I put you on the spot a little bit there.
No
Beverley,
problem at all.
just to bring it back to your personal story, I know one of the things you've done to try and educate parents about this role and to support people who might be considering fostering children is to draw up a guide called Strengthening Families in a South African Context. Just in closing, will you tell us a little bit more about this document and what you hope will become of it?
Yes, so a couple of years ago we wrote this manual, which really is to be used as a training tool. So within a training context of training up foster, adoptive parents, as well as parents who are at risk of their family breaking down. So you're at risk of your children being removed, or they have been removed and you want to be reunified with them. So it's really just looking at what is foster care, what is adoption, how do we, parent children who are vulnerable or children who have been traumatized, those kinds of topics that are discussed. And we just believe that if foster parents and adoptive parents are properly prepared and properly supported in the process, we'll see a lot less breakdown of placements than what we have been seeing. In Gauteng, I think 60% of foster placements break down,
Sure.
which really means that in that 2-year period, the foster parents or the child are saying, we can't do this anymore, please move the child. And that's a very high number. So we're wanting to see people not only properly screened, but also properly trained and supported through the process, whether that is therapy, whether that is just, people you can, speak to and that understand and you can offload on. We just believe that's going to make a difference to the number of placements that will actually succeed.
Yeah. Beverley, then the final question is, where does one get hold of a copy of that guide?
So at the moment, we're currently only using it as part of our training that we do, but we are hoping to take that training throughout the country by training up other social workers who will then be able to use it as well.
I hope that does indeed happen. Thank you so much, Beverley Burkus, MD of Oasis Haven Children's Home in Gauteng, talking to us there about the foster care system, and appreciate the insight from somebody who's actually been a foster parent herself. Beverley, thank you for joining us.